Welcome to Behind the SME, the podcast where we dive into the stories of founders, leaders, and visionaries of small and medium-sized enterprises. As the CEO of a small business myself, I want to uncover what drives the success of SMEs by talking to those who are in the trenches, building their businesses from the ground up. I hope you enjoy the episode. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
What a treat this is.
It's been a long time.
Well, I normally start by explaining how I know the guest, and
That could be dangerous.
yeah, we'll go for the vanilla version of it. So we go back some 18 years, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
First met when we were both involved in a sales internship.
Yeah, we certainly were, and that was quite an experience, really. Door-to-door sales, as raw as it gets.
Yeah.
Living in close quarters with each other.
Yeah.
In a really quite a high competitive environment as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think first year there was probably 40 odd people in the room at the beginning of the summer, 8 weeks, like I said, knocking on doors. Numbers don't lie. It was very exposing who the best, who the worst was. And then we did that for 3 years together, didn't we? Easter, summer. And then you carried on with it, didn't you?
I carried on for another 4 years after that.
4 years, yeah.
And we had towards the end, bringing on 250 students every year.
So you're 24, 25 at that point, and the COO of a company bringing 250 people through a program every year.
It was quite something.
That's
I learned
mad.
about people businesses
Yeah.
during that time, and I learned a lot about everything that I do now. Everything that we learn, going door to door, managing people, bringing people through, is at the fundamental essence of what I do from a public speaking and presentation perspective. It's funny how things carry through.
Yeah, and we've had Stuart Lotherington on, who was one of the program directors, probably
Great episode.
50, yeah, it's worth a listen. Probably 15 years prior to us being on. We've had Tim Gray on, who was a student in Stuart Lotherington's era. So there is a bit of a common theme of people that have gone through, and I think people that have had that door-to-door experience kind of gravitate towards each other because they know how hard it is, but also how rewarding it can be as well.
It's amazing, the legacy. When I tell people that we did door to door, they often sort of like, oh, it's quite an instinctive sort of, oh, I'm not sure about that. But some days it would restore your faith in humanity.
Yeah.
Other days it was absolutely brutal and it was exactly as you expected it to be.
Yeah.
But actually you come through the other end and you learn so much. And I think one of the most important skills that you learn from a business perspective is how to build trust quickly.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got long on a door to get people to warm to you.
And actually moving on to where you've taken your career really informed the next few chapters, didn't it? So tell us what happens beyond Champions.
Well, when we were growing Champions, we would spend 3 months on the road every year, giving talks every single day at universities. And someone saw me speak and said, do you want to speak at a TEDx event? And I'd never come across TED or TEDx before.
Right.
I'd started to get asked to do the odd talk here and there. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Didn't think about it. 2 weeks before, look up TED. Oh, I'm totally out of my depth here. Panicked really hard. Watched a load of talks.
Yeah.
And then 2 days before I was due to give that talk, it got cancelled and I never gave one.
Oh, no. What was going to be the topic? Do you remember?
It was going to be on how university doesn't prepare you for the world of work.
Right. And TEDx, so people, I assume, we're familiar with TED, but what's TEDx?
So TED has actually been around since the 1980s, but really came into prominence when YouTube came about. Chris Anderson, the curator, he'd recently taken on this conference publishing company, essentially, that was losing a huge amount of money. And he'd heard about this new platform called YouTube that you could put videos up on, and he decided to pair the two things together. So TED got really famous and started to grow with YouTube and accelerate its growth through YouTube. And then in 2009, they asked themselves, well, how can we bring the TED experience to people who can't afford to pay 10 grand a ticket? And they came up with this licensing model. And the rest really is history. After my sort of potential becoming a TEDx speaker thing, I wasn't so interested in actually speaking myself. But I loved the talks. Like they really gripped me. So I looked into running my own event, and I thought, quite successful, doing pretty well for someone my age. I think I could run a pretty good event. Applied to speak. Within 24 hours, they said, nope, straight rejection.
Wow.
Just straight up. So, I come from a door-to-door sales background, so I'll try again. And long story short, it took me 2 years to convince TED to let me have one of their licenses to run an event.
Really?
They were pretty brutal. And I had an inkling that they were going to let me the very last time because I didn't get rejected within 24 hours.
Wow. So you ran TEDx Clapham, didn't you, for a couple of years?
Ran TEDx Clapham for a couple of years. And I just started to get really interested in the little tweaks that you could make to how someone might be presenting an idea on stage that could then go and have a real profound impact on how that message ends up being received. And that's really been at the very, very core of everything that I do. And we had one person speak that year, and their name's Isabel Chapman. And, when I became a TEDx curator, you put it up on your LinkedIn because it looks kind of cool. Everyone starts flooding you with, can I come and speak at your event? Can I come and speak at your event? And I was at a party, and someone said, you need to speak to Isabel. She'd be a really good TEDx speaker. I'm like, oh, here we go again, because everyone's like, I want to talk about me. Put me on stage so I can talk about me. Yeah. And that's not really what TED's about. And I was sort of preparing myself for a here we go again style conversation. What do you want to speak about? I want to talk about me. And she goes, no, I want to change the perception of sexual assault. And that was one sentence. That was her pitch. And I was like, well, that's different and big and cool. Makes me feel like I'm part of something. She had no right. She was 2 years out of university. She had no right to be giving a talk like that. She should have really said, well, let me introduce you to my boss. But that was just not what it was about. So I was like, yeah, you're in. 6 months later, she gives that talk. 2 years later, I'm sitting at Clapham Junction station waiting for a train. I get a call. She never calls me. I was like, what's going on? And she goes, we've done it. And I was like, what do you mean? And the government had just changed UK legislation. Her talk had played a part in making that change happen. And so the reason sex and relationship education is compulsory in schools is the talk played a part in that.
Wow.
That just sums up for me what I think public speaking is about. I think a lot of people think about public speaking as a performance skill. I think it's a strategy skill, and it's something that you can use and leverage to create change in a really meaningful way.
Yeah. I want to come on to that whole topic, but I want to finish off your, I guess, career story, because from what I'm gathering, it sounds like curating TEDx and seeing some talks flop and some do really well made you kind of fall in love with the science and the theory behind what makes a really effective presentation public speaker. Is that what happened, and that informed the next portion of your work?
It certainly informed my passion. What actually happened was the people who were speaking on stage, they didn't realize I was, I was running this charity fundraising agency behind the scenes. They thought that this is what I did as a job. So they started referring the odd person to me.
Right.
And so when we ended up having to shut that business down, and we shut it down because the business model wasn't robust enough. Everyone was winning except for the business itself.
Yeah.
I luckily had a few clients who were, I was helping with presentations. And so I was like, well, I don't know what else to do. Like, let's just see where that goes.
Right. Wow. Okay. So that was the genesis of the next phase, which was, I think, one-to-one coaching for people.
That's how it all started. It was all one-to-one coaching. And intentionally, one of the things that we did was we made it remote from the very, very beginning, which, has been a really, it's consistent and stayed all the way through. So perhaps a little bit different, but we were a little bit early, and it's not been like a straightforward rise and a straightforward journey through. It's been pretty challenging.
Nice. So the new, I say new, it's been around for a couple of years, hasn't it? But
nearly 10.
I was going to talk about Mic Drop.
Oh, Mic Drop.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
It's a couple of years. I
Mic
think.
Drops. Yeah, we're 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a bit about Mic
years.
Drop.
Mic Drop. Mic Drop came about because there's so much more to speaking than the standing on stage. There's, the people that I work with are trying to amplify ideas at scale and get messages out at scale that are seen by a huge number of people. And in order to do that, it's all the stuff that happens around the actual engagement itself that really matter. And it all starts with putting together a message and working out what it is that you stand for and who's going to listen to it. And then on the other side, it's how do you get it out so it gets seen by lots of people. And that was really at the very, very essence of what Mic Drop's about. But it's a public speaking community for thought leaders. And we've got 150 members across so many different topics and expertise. It's now become the very, very core of what I do.
So I'm naive in this area. A thought leader, is this someone that's a CEO of a business that is also at the forefront of thinking about their space and therefore does some speaking, or is this someone whose job it is to be a thought leader in an area and quite well researched? Or tell me about the profile.
I'm a really big believer that the founder of a business should be at the forefront, should be the public person behind it, because ultimately they're the ones who've sort of been at the very heart of creating that idea. And if we look at the growth trajectories of businesses between founders that speak and those that are sort of public facing, and it doesn't have to be standing on a stage. It could be writing a podcast, it could be posting on LinkedIn, it could be writing a newsletter, whatever that might be. Their growth trajectory seems to go a little bit faster. So it's that personal brand element that we're sort of looking at and taking care of there.
Yeah, which links, I think, probably to a piece of literature that we're both very fond of, that I think would work really well as a good bit of advice, as a book takeaway for our listeners, which is a guy called Daniel Priestley.
It's been amazing watching Daniel's journey over the last. I came across him first back in 2016.
Yeah,
he is relentless.
17, 18, yeah.
He is relentless, and what we're seeing happen to him right now in the last 18 months or so in particular.
He's blown up, yeah.
He's completely blown up, but he has been working so hard behind the scenes to perfect his craft.
Let me tell you how I met him, because it's quite a funny story. So I was at a sales meeting with a client. This must have been 2017 or 18. Still a client to this day, actually. Amazing company. He won't mind the shout out. A nice chap called Bill. He's been in the industry forever, Bill Evans. And I was kind of chatting to him about what we do, and he goes, "You know what you are, Adam?" And I was like, "Go on." He goes, "You're a key person of influence." And I was like, "What do you mean? I don't understand the expression." Anyway, he sends me Daniel Priestley's book, Key Person of Influence, and I read it and was very flattered. He was wrong, but it was very kind of him. And then I went to I read the next bit, which is 24 Assets, and took Bill to a conference where Daniel was speaking about 24 Assets. And then I ended up doing one of the courses, which is a kind of 20 people in a room getting coached in a 20-to-1 format through this program by Daniel. And what he's done, I think, really cleverly is put a system behind the entrepreneurial journey, from the formation of an idea through to building a personal brand and all the strategies behind that, and then a structure for scaling a business from 10 people through to 40 or 50 people. And most recently, I think probably most high profile recent bit of exposure was on Diary of a CEO. Am I right saying he's done 2 now?
No, he's done 4.
He's done 4 now. Goodness me. But they're all incredible.
They're all incredible. And I'm planning to write a newsletter on why he's done 4. It's so rare that anyone gets invited back to speak on a podcast anyway, let alone the #1 podcast in the world.
Yeah. So why do you think it is?
Well, I think he's what he's built is a worldview. So the very first podcast he came to speak on, his angle was really around entrepreneurship and building wait lists and all the stuff that we really become synonymous with him on. But then since then, he's been invited back to speak about what's happening with AI. He's been invited to have a debate with someone else who I really admire, who's properly up and coming, Gary Stevenson, on wealth inequality. He is able to talk at depth about so many different subjects. And because he covered his core subject so well, and because he doesn't just stick to his core subject when he posts on LinkedIn and so forth, he ventures out. I talk about this idea of home and away. Most people just, stay at home. It's very nice and safe. We know that topic. That's the thing. Occasionally, it's kind of fun to venture out and talk outside that. And it's only through talking outside into and venturing into other topics that we start to become experts in them. We have to practice it. Yeah. And he's just done that so well. It's been amazing to see it and watch it.
He's probably got one of the only companies that is not a recognized household name where I remember their mantra.
Go on. What's that?
Be brave, have fun, make a dent.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Why would you remember integrity, authenticity, and passion?
Yeah.
Laugh. But actually, that sums up Dent really, really well. But KPI is a great book. It really is key person of influence. And to your point, how we got there, founder building brand is a large kind of part of that. You are, we joke around, a prolific LinkedIner. It's been a really good source of your way of building brand. 20-something thousand followers on LinkedIn. You post a lot, gets a lot of interaction. Always enjoy reading them. What's your advice for people that are, I guess, embarking on the LinkedIn journey? Because you can get it very wrong, can't you?
You can get it very wrong. And I think you can also get sucked into the minutiae of what the algorithm likes and doesn't like. And I think there is a time and place for that. But the first and foremost, the most important thing you need to do is just start and get into a habit of writing about your topic and sharing the stuff that you really care about, that is related to your business. Talk about it. The stuff you get paid for, people pay you lots of money for, give it away, because you will get more people coming and asking you for help if you do that. You have to showcase your expertise. But I think that there are a couple of other things. If you really want to build that personal brand, if I had to start again from scratch, and I had no followers, 0 connections, I'd be posting every day just so I can start documenting my thoughts, and, as a phrase that Daniel Priestley uses, turn IP into assets. That's what that is. That's what's happening right there. But I would also get onto an aggressive commenting strategy. And I'm not talking about AI comments. I would go to accounts that have a massive following, and I would start showcasing my expertise and adding to that. So a really good example might be, I might go to Ted's LinkedIn profile. Every day they're posting a snippet of a talk. I will give all my public speaking tips that person has just demonstrated in that comment. And because that post is doing well, and because I'm teaching people through the comments, my comments will get seen. I'll start getting followers. That is how I would start blanket out.
Yeah. You spoke in a recent post about the self-promotion trap. Tell us a little bit about that. I think it's a really valuable piece of advice, but yeah, talk us through what that means.
If we were happy and content with how business was, we wouldn't be spending any time on LinkedIn. We'd be sat on a beach, right? So what we do when we post is we want people to recognize us, and we want to be associated with expertise. We want to be seen. We want to feel seen, and we want to come across as credible. And so when you approach your content strategy with that logic in mind, what that says is we must talk about all the great things that are happening. We should make ourselves look as good as possible. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And more often than not, what you'll find is those who focus on look at me will go nowhere. But if you can focus around look at this, look at what is happening here. Talk about the things that you are learning along the way. Talk about the messy middle. one of the reasons I think Mic Drop's been so successful is because regularly I will post the stuff that isn't actually going that well, or I'll talk about things that we're thinking about doing. And it's just a way of just testing to see how something might land, how something might not. Instead of saying, look, I'm in the Forbes 30 under 30. Look at me. Look how amazing I am. I would challenge somebody to say, why don't you tell the story of how you actually got into Forbes 30 under 30? Did you pay someone some money? Who wrote your application for you? That is so much more interesting and a much more effective way of building trust with a group of people than just saying, look how high profile I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's amazing what you're saying is people gather around a mission or a message or a theory more than they gather around a person that's waving from the rooftop saying, look at me.
If you looked at my most successful LinkedIn posts of all time, stuff that's really gained traction, it has never been about me. It has always been about me showcasing what someone else has done.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot in public speaking about the difference between a good public speaker and a great public speaker is it's about your choice of examples and the stories that you're telling. And they don't have to be your stories. They can be other people's stories. If you want to become somebody who gets to go on these big stages, starting with your story isn't the thing that's going to land you. You need to have a message that people are going to be able to learn from and really get behind. And then the stories are going to bring that message to life.
What are your absolute killer bits of advice for someone to nail a public speech?
Meet your audience where they are at.
What does that mean?
So we are experts in our own domain, in our own fields. And the further along we go, the closer we get to sounding like a professor in our subjects. And when a professor is talking to another professor who's been in that world for that amount of time, that is absolutely fine. But when you are sharing stuff that you hope is going to be useful for other people, you've got to meet them where they need to be. A really good example of this. Did you ever see Emma Watson give a talk at the UN?
No, but I do know of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
So she went to the UN to launch a campaign called He for She. And I use this as an example because I just think it's a really clever example. Everyone in that room was middle-aged, white-haired male. And she was there talking about feminism. And so...
Probably coming in with a... people going, that's Hermione Granger.
Yes.
That, they're not thinking,
Yes.
people have already... They've already profiled her.
Completely.
Before walking in the door, yeah.
And this is it. You have to meet your audience where they're at with their subject, or if you're famous, where the preconceptions might be about you too. You need to address them in some way. Yeah. And she does that really early on.
Really interesting, yeah.
And if you look at the journey she takes people on, if we were going to sum up what a white-haired, middle-aged male might think about feminism back then, it might have been feminism is for women. That's a fairly kind of, I think most people would get on board with that. And that's where she starts her talk. Up until now, feminism has been all about women. It's got to stop. We need to make men, or we need to bring men into this equation. Men need to be at the forefront of the feminist movement. So by the end of that talk, they've gone from feminism is for women to feminism is for men. Yeah. And that's the journey.
Which as a slogan is very confrontational, which is exactly what I think you're saying is a really great thing. It's this thought-provoking message for a speech that makes you go, what does that mean? Which is what you want to hear. You don't want the whole thing in one line, do you? You want to go, well, let's explore this.
We want to challenge the way our audience think and feel.
Yeah.
And if we don't do that, we either shut off because we can't follow what's being said, or we get really defensive.
Okay.
We get really defensive because we think we already know about a topic.
And so practically, do you stand up and you go, I know what you're thinking? Tall, posh, white guy about to lecture you about X. What's the... How do you approach that?
You could... That is certainly one of those things.
Right.
But what you could also actually do is you could say, I want to start this with a confession. And you take the preconceptions that people might have about you perhaps being on your high horse because of how you look.
Yeah.
and you share something that is relevant, isn't a sob story, isn't some like trauma porn, but something that humanizes you and says, this is just me as I am, and I'm speaking on a level with you today.
Mm-hmm.
You can also go into a room and say, look, I know that all of you are already really good at this. So I'm not even here to show you how to do something. But what I'm hoping that you might be able to get is just a different way of thinking about stuff that you already know that could unlock something new for you.
And so let's say you're speaking at a conference of software engineers about a topic that you know really well. But it's software engineers that maybe is a different personality type to you and something you might know less about, I'm guessing, right? But that applies to me. Would you literally sit down with a pen and paper and go, where is my audience at? What's on their mind? What are they going through? Like, do you try and just kind of think as they would think for in your preparation?
I put on the hat of a very skeptical software engineer who doesn't really want to be in that room, be much rather be doing something else and be like, how do I speak to them?
Yeah.
And once upon a time, that would be through ideating and just thinking and tearing my hair out. But now I created a GPT called the Audience Whisperer. And that its exact purpose is to do that. It's what are the most obvious things? What are the common preconceptions this group are likely to have? Because then it's like, well, okay, there's your starting point. Mm-hmm. And if you can pinpoint that down, then there are so many different places that you can take it.
Yeah, super interesting. So that was your killer tip number 1. What's your killer tip number 2 for nailing a great presentation?
I'm gonna take it back to something I said around challenging your audience.
Okay.
So in political science, there's a concept known as the Overton window. I don't know. Have you come across that?
Only from
looking
at your LinkedIn. Yeah.
So the Overton window essentially is what politicians use to decide how an idea is probably going to land with the public. And in politics, you're looking for something that just pushes your audience a little bit, but doesn't take them too far, typically speaking. I don't know whether we can necessarily, in this current political climate, link it to that. If we put the Overton window into the context of public speaking, the majority of public speakers play it extremely safe with their message. And by safe, I'm talking about something that's a little bit bland, agreeable. It isn't pushing your audience past and out of their comfort zone or getting to see things in a different light. They're staying in the Overton window. When you go out of the Overton window, you hit radical ideas and unthinkable ideas. And if you can start thinking about what might radical be to this audience, it might not be radical to you, but it might be for your audience, then you're much more likely to create something that people are going to remember.
And yeah, I that's interesting because I would assume that success from a talk is walking away and everyone is feeling happy. But actually what you're saying is quite the opposite. You want some people to disagree and you want some people to agree, and to spark conversation is more, that's a successful conversation. You promote emotion and thought.
Yeah, and I think with the right intention, I think it's important to be challenging ideas and topics. And I think as long as it's done with the right intention, it can be incredibly powerful because you start to stand for something. And that's, when you stand up on stage, you don't want to just be telling people what you've done. You want to be challenging the status quo and getting people to think bigger in whatever industry or subject matter you might be talking about.
Yeah, really interesting. You've also spoken before about the difference between storytelling and message building. And historically, you would probably say a good speaker is someone that can, curate a really great story. And actually, you challenge that by saying, actually, a good speaker is someone that builds a good message. And I think you describe yourself as a messaging strategist. Just give us a little bit more on that.
Everything starts with your message. If you can get clear on what your message is, the stories will follow after that. So,
let's do a live demo.
Yeah, I'm glad you're up for it.
Have you seen Jake Humphrey and Simon Sinek do this? They talk about Jake's basically saying, "Help me find my why."
Sure, let's do it. I'm
Yeah.
so in.
Okay. So we'll use me as an example. So I'm the CEO of a business. What's my messaging?
What do you want to change?
Well, the way SMEs are run.
Why?
Because I think there's a huge opportunity for small businesses to impact change.
What's the biggest misconception that small businesses have that they need to realize that you don't believe they've realized yet?
That they have more sway than they think, because of their agility, because they have the ability to move fast, and yeah, and they can react. They're at the coalface. They're interacting with their clients way more than larger companies. So yeah, they're normally the catalysts of innovation, but without the budget, they're scrappy and they need to be.
Okay, so if we take that as a general premise and as a general message, and we can wordsmith it and make it look beautiful and punchy, but we won't do that now because we could do that. Then I'd say, okay, great. What examples of businesses have you seen that have been so fast moving, they have changed, they have impacted things that you would expect incumbents to be impacting?
Someone that we both know, Lindsay from For the Creators.
Tell me that story.
Built a business which is in response to the lack of products available for pregnant women. So she built a rental company, so that you could rent maternity wear for the different stages of pregnancy and postnatal, and had to pivot a lot, build a brand, build a community, build a platform in a space that's full of big incumbents where there's already an established market in the US.
Great. What's happened to Lindsay in that business?
Well, it's gone from strength to strength. You have to listen to the next podcast. It's gone from strength to strength. She's raised the third round of funding, about to meet profitability, built brand and a message, yeah, I think just a really great success story.
Perfect. So there you've got a message and you've got an example of someone who is driving that home. And with a little bit of playing, you might start that story with something like, you would expect that the people that would be having the biggest impact on pregnant women in the fast-moving consumer goods world would be P&G. But it's not. It's the small businesses that are, their whole message and their whole reason for being is about tackling a wrong that should have been dealt with years and years ago. And Lindsay is a perfect example of this. Let me tell you Lindsay's story.
Yeah.
And then you take it through.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for that.
And the more examples you have, you just, depending on who you're speaking to, you'll use a different example. You know, Lindsay's story is going to work with, I actually think Lindsay's story will work with lots of people. I think it's super inspiring what she's managed to achieve, and against all odds, and at the time of her life while she's doing it too. I just think there's a huge amount there. But then there are going to be other stories that come in and be like, actually, I'm going to pick this one today. And so when it comes to creating talks or going on podcasts, like I'm going to take that story, you know, and then that kind of formulates where you might take the whatever it is, the engagement that you're doing.
Yeah. So do you think all business leaders should be, if they're not building a profile for themselves and getting out there, then they're missing a trick? Do you think they should all be doing some kind of speaking arrangements, speaking gigs? Is that your belief?
I think that founders should play to their strengths. There are so many different ways to amplify messages. For some people, that might be coming into a room, being interviewed by someone like you, and talking things out and sharing their story this way. But this podcast isn't going to get seen unless we both share it. So they're going to have to post about that story. Some people might not like the camera setup. Excellent camera setup.
Thank you,
by the way. Some people might not like the spotlight, or they prefer to be in a room with lots of people, or they might prefer to have no one in the room at all. And so they might just write something out. But I think those who do will invariably grow their businesses faster than those that don't.
Mm.
And if we think about how we evolve and how businesses evolve, like it's been amazing watching how you've taken Keen partners from strength to strength and how you've got involved with other businesses, all the stuff that you're doing, your message and journey, and it's evolving all the time. And I think that it's important that we give ourselves the best chance for whatever that next evolution is, for it to be just a little bit easier than it was the last time. And a personal brand can really help with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember sitting down with a LinkedIn strategist once who said something really, really similar. And he asked me the question, do you plan on launching any new products in the next 3 years? I was like, well, yeah, of course. And he goes, do you think having a really loyal, large follower base on LinkedIn or any type of social media would help with that? It's a yes question, and well, there you go. That's the power of personal brand, and yeah,
I would challenge that strategist slightly, which is everything that we have on LinkedIn is owned by LinkedIn, and one algorithm changed from being completely obsolete. So my current strategy is to take as many people from LinkedIn, which is where my primary following is, and get them into my newsletter. Because that way I have a sense of control.
It's old school, that, isn't it? It's very old school. But why do you think it's going that direction? Because of owning the list.
Owning the list.
Yeah.
We've been monitoring the statistics of how many people come through LinkedIn for me and how many people come through my newsletter. We're now at a point where 60% come from my newsletter.
Wow.
I don't have many people on my newsletter, but they are like highly engaged.
Tim Ferriss, was he the original newsletter guy? He was,
Yeah.
wasn't he? He had millions of people on. It was very famous kind of weekly or monthly newsletter.
You get to talk about the stuff that you're even more interested. You can be a little bit more specific and niche on your newsletter than you can be on LinkedIn.
Because the audience is known.
Because they already get it.
Right.
Like they wouldn't have signed up if they didn't have an invested extra level of interest.
Yeah.
So I think I push my audience much more in my it's called Founder to Thought Leader. I push them much more in there than I do on my LinkedIn. And what we've built is a suite of once upon a time they'd have been called lead magnets. And I guess they still are lead magnets, but they're tools. I released a set of tools last year that are now completely obsolete, but help me drive my email list. But we're about to release Mic Drop OS, which is going to be a suite of GPTs that are going to help people with their talks. And I think actually the future of what we're going to be able to give people in exchange for joining a list is going to be mind-blowing with where things are going.
Yeah. I want to come on to AI, but I before we do, I want to finish talking about public speaking by talking about confidence, by talking about fear, because a lot of people would rather do anything but do a talk in front of anybody. Do you get scared?
I am a reluctant speaker.
Really?
I look back, Adam, at when we were both in Champions, and I would watch you give talks. I'm like, my God, I'd love to be able to speak like that.
Oh, you're very kind.
It was you were, and I'm sure still are, unbelievable. You've got the stage presence, the energy. I mean, were you nervous before?
I think the right type of nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of veering more on that excitement side of things.
Yeah, I think raring to get up there.
Yeah.
And they were very different talks to the things I have to do now. Probably more nervous nowadays. Yeah.
Is that because they're higher stakes?
I think because, I mean, I had nothing to lose then. And I think, probably a greater degree of scrutiny over everything that's said nowadays.
I so relate to the feeling like we had nothing to lose back then when we were younger.
We could be very edgy then.
We could be. And we also lived in blissful ignorance.
Agreed.
We didn't know what we don't know. And one of the things that's particularly interesting to me is the further along someone gets in their career, the more likely they are to really struggle with public speaking, which is the opposite of what you'd actually expect. But I've had some absolute shockers in my time.
Oh, let's hear some.
The worst was I just joined this community of founders that I had no right to be part of joining. And they had like a bringing everyone together at Nick Jenkins' house, Manor, in, I think it's in Gloucestershire. We called it Moonpig Manor. 50 of us, some super successful people there, founders of companies that you've all heard of. The only reason I was in that community was not because of any success that I'd had, but because I had, by some good luck, coached the founder of that community.
Right.
And they said, come be part of it. A few weeks later, so I join it. A few weeks later, he's like, right, come along to this event and give a talk. And the format of the talks were Pecha Kuchas. Do you know?
No.
It's Pecha Kucha, a very, very simple concept. 20 slides on automatic timer, and they just tick through every 20 seconds. You have no control over what's going on behind you, except for the slides that you have, kind of the journey that you're going to take your audience on. Wow. I was introduced to that group as the guy who had trained this other founder and a number of other founders. And I remember,
what a build up.
I remember being introduced up for the Pecha Kucha that evening, and one of the other guys in the room goes, "This better be good." And I was like, "Oh." I had spent weeks. This is what they wouldn't have realized. I spent weeks panicking about what on earth I was going to say. I decided to go really spicy and talk about freedom of speech, which actually is not a good topic. That gets you into all sorts of trouble. But you know, I wanted to challenge people's preconceptions. So I was like, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my talk by pretending to bomb on stage, because then it will get people to think, oh, maybe he's not a good public speaker. And then my second slide was going to be, gotcha. I can't act. So I don't know what sort of mindset I was in that made me think that this was a good idea. So I was so nervous about how I was even going to open this thing. It was way beyond my capabilities. Anyway, I get up on stage, power goes off. And I'm just stood there like a lemon in front of all these people. The slides aren't working behind me. And I basically have to stand there for 5 minutes waiting for the power to sort itself out. And when it does, they ignored the first slide and they went straight to the gotcha slide. I mean, it was just a complete disaster. Oh, wow. Everything went wrong.
Yeah.
And it did.
In hindsight, I mean, I actually think back to, I sound like I'm a real LinkedIn stalker, but you wrote a post actually about Daniel Priestley and how he absolutely crushed his first Diary of a CEO. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. And you wrote about, it wasn't by accident, you spoke about his preparation podcasts and how he went on, I think 3 or 4 in advance of the podcast to kind of refine his messaging and his story.
I mean, over the years, I think he's been on tens, if not hundreds.
Right.
If you search Daniel Priestley podcasts, you can't get to the bottom of the feed. Really? There's just so many. So, you know, the huge amounts of preparation that just make all this stuff completely second nature. Yeah. And, you know, the environment you're in plays such a big part.
How do you, I mean, surely if you, there's a danger that it can go stale, right? You might do 20 preparation podcasts and then by the time you get to the big one, you've said it 20 times and it doesn't land so well.
I think that every time you deliver it, you'll share it slightly differently. Right, it will tweak. And I think what you've got to do is, we all get to a point where, you know, there'll be some things that Daniel's saying that he's been saying for 15, 20 years. It's like, oh, it's not exciting to him anymore. But you find a way to get yourself into the zone. And we have to reconnect with why we're doing it in the first place. And we have to recycle our content in order to get good at it. And those people who are diehard fans of Daniel,
guilty.
We're very, very happy to hear the stuff again because we'll take something different out from it.
I always think that about, I don't know, let's take a band like Top Loader. They must be so bored of dancing
that
in
one
the
song.
Moonlight. Yeah, and they've got some other really good songs, but they must have to do that week in, week out.
100%.
And how long? It's been around for 20 plus years.
And they do it because they're professional. That's the job.
Put the same energy in every single time.
Yeah, I think really good analogy.
We like talking about AI with our guests because everybody's experience and view of it is very different. And so it's nice just to get a kind of a glimpse from their world. How's AI impacting what you do as a business? And yeah, what's your take on it?
AI for me is the best thing for our business. It's going to allow us to scale and reach more people, help more people in a far lower friction way than ever before. So from a business perspective, I'm very, very happy and very, very comfortable. Had we not been building Mic Drop, which is a product that is centered around people and community and shared values, I would be incredibly worried about where my business was going in the future. But I don't think we need to be. My biggest concern with AI for leaders is that they treat it as a replacement for thought as opposed to a partner for thought. That's the biggest concern for me. Have you noticed that ChatGPT has got a dash that's longer than what we're used to?
A hyphen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it longer? I just noticed they use it a lot.
Um,
Is this the tell, is it?
It's longer.
Is it?
And
Okay.
every time I see a longer dash, my heart sinks a little bit.
Mm.
And I just think, oh, you may not have put anything into that. And so...
Yeah. You think we can... There's a danger we get lazy.
I think there's a real danger that we can get lazy.
And don't exercise the muscle that is our creative brain.
Exactly that. I think everything's got to start with us. Otherwise, we're not going to even connect with the content that's being created anyway. You can spot it a mile away on LinkedIn. Like there's that, it just doesn't connect. It doesn't seem to, the topic doesn't seem to connect with the person, and what they're saying, it just sort of talks at you rather than it talks to you. We can spot it. So I do think there's a danger of that. And the knock-on impacts that will have on people's businesses is just, well, they're not going to be able to communicate what their business does or the change that they're trying to stand for to their customers, to their team. It's going to have to investors. It's going to have a profound impact. But if you use it as something that pushes your ideas, tests your ideas, and goes a little bit further, I think it can be really, really quite powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight.
What's your take?
Well, we're in a business that I think is potentially going to be quite disrupted, and we're essentially making a bet that our clients don't want to interact with a chatbot, because for us, it's all about what you prompt. You have to ask the right questions to get the right answers, and we back ourselves and be able to ask the right questions. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we should shy away from it. So we've always had an expression which we call innovate from within, which basically says, if I have a team who are out there, working with clients every day, it's my job as their leader to arm them with the best tools. And I see AI as a tool. If they're lumberjacks, it's the most advanced chainsaw. If 5 years ago they were using an axe, now they're using a hell of a chainsaw. And it is AI, one of those amazing tractors that does it all, maybe, but it still needs an operator. And so that's the way I see it, as an opportunity to scale and deliver more from our clients. Am I excited? Yes and no. Yes and no.
Cautious.
Apprehensive.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a big change. I don't see the kind of pull to putting a huge amount of investment into something now, because I think the cost of building things is already fallen in the last 12 months. It's fallen massively. So keep an eye on things, and be agile is our approach. We're using what's available, but without making huge strides, because I think we're so early in this whole journey. We'll look back at conversations we're having now and laugh.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how it settles down. But I do think that the human element is always going to be there. If you look at things that have become dehumanized in the last 10 years, things like socializing, we've lost the human to human element, and yet we're already seeing it coming back around. The popular apps are ones where you post once a day, or it encourages you to meet up, whatever. Like we are seeing the kind of the reversal of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think we should be cautious before we jump into a world of surrogacy, and us living in a chair. I don't know if you've ever seen that Bruce Willis film, but it's worth watching. Have you seen Surrogate?
No.
It's quite a fascinating film, and everyone should watch it because
Okay.
it's a, I guess, a concept film, but like In Time, Justin Timberlake, where time is your currency for life,
Yeah.
and money. But surrogacy is basically saying everyone lives in a dark room, sat in a chair, controlling a very lifelike AI robot version of themselves that goes and lives their life. And Bruce Willis is going, no, I want to live my life. I don't want my robot to live my life. And they're all huge, but out in the world goes this kind of perfect version of them.
Yes. Got you.
So look, obviously that's an extreme kind of take on where it could land, and I just think that people want to be in person. Look at the return to office. You said to me the other day you'd never do a remote podcast again because you think there's more value when in person. I think the old school has something to be said for it, but we have to be using the tools available.
Yeah.
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 But
Yeah.
again, I will laugh at this in probably 6 months' time and go, what a fool I was. I'm absolutely sure of that. Yeah. Tell me, you used an expression the other day that I'd never heard before called donkey corn.
Oh, yeah.
What's a donkey corn?
A donkey corn. I really wish I could credit the guy who came up with that, but I won't. I'll credit the guy whose AI blog I read that is amazing. His name's Evgeny Shagvadev. He's going to kill me for butchering his surname. And he has got perhaps one of the most insightful blogs, essentially taking us through his own journey and his own relationship with AI. And he mentioned this idea of creating a donkey corn, which is essentially it's there might be a specific figure attached to it. I'm less attached to the figure, but let's say it's a £1 billion company that has 3 people in it. That's what he believes that AI has the potential to be able to create if AI is used in the right way. And the most profound observation that he's given me that's changed the way I think about AI has been the mistake that he's seeing people make is they're trying to fit AI into their existing world. And what he thinks is that we need to start with AI first, and that's kind of the word or term that he's sort of owning. And it's like AI first, and you imagine that you were starting from scratch and AI was at the center of it. Build from that point. And that's been a real unlock for me for how the business can potentially move and go moving forward too. And ultimately it will create a donkey corn.
Yeah.
Mwahaha.
I love that. Would you, if you had the option to have had ChatGPT or equivalent during your education years, would you have taken it or not?
That's a really good question. If I think about it from I've got quite a pessimistic view on my education.
Okay.
Which was, I don't think I learnt a huge amount, really. I think I learnt more life skills generally at university and at school. I didn't have much useful IP that I've managed to take and leverage. If you were to reframe that question, say, would you have taken ChatGPT at the start of you starting to be very conscious about building your personal brand and be more public facing?
Yeah, different stage of your life. But yeah,
I would say no to start with, or I'd have a condition on it, which is I have to write the thing first. ChatGPT can improve it afterwards. And I think too many people do it the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, even with that, there's a danger that you get lazy in the first draft, right? Because you know that it's going to get looked at by something that's, pretty sharp. My take on it is no. I think having gone through writing a terrible essay and getting terrible marks, the pain, having to rewrite it, the sitting down,
That's the value.
learning why it's been, why it's so bad. That's a lesson in itself.
You learn through the pain of. I can fundamentally agree.
The
with
learning journey is important. You learn how to learn as well. You learn what your process is. I have a process for putting together a presentation.
Go on.
Well, I'll write it out in full.
Yeah.
Literally verbatim. This is what I want to say, and then I truncate it to the first part of that sentence and maybe a couple of little prompts, and then from when I'm talking, and then I practice it by looking at it, and each time it's different. But I like that; it's fresh. But I know that there's a long version, and then when I'm doing the talk, I can just look down and look at the start of the sentence. And I don't want to read it. I just want to look at the start of the sentence to remind me where I'm going with it, and just a couple of keywords in there.
I love that. The writing of it is where you actually connect with it cognitively.
Exactly.
And emotionally.
Yeah.
And then, but the mistake so many people make that you're not making is you need to give yourself some fluidity. The reason why most people hate presentations is they feel like it's this memory test. Shouldn't be treated like a memory test.
Yeah. And actually, the process that I now do has evolved to having the 4 or 5 word prompts on the slide. So minimal words, but my 4 or 5 keywords are in there. So I don't actually even need notes. My slides are my notes. I will always make sure I've got the screen in front of me, so I'm not looking around at it where possible. And then I'm not using a script. I'm just using the prompts. Yeah.
Absolutely the way to go. Totally the right way to be thinking about it.
Let's begin the wrap up. You obviously have studied influential and really good speakers. Who's someone we don't know about that we should look up?
If you haven't come across Alain de Botton.
Yeah.
Do you know Alain?
No.
Brilliant. He founded the School of Life. I got a chance to see him speak in a really small room. I love just watching his brain well. He's a philosopher, but he speaks so beautifully. If someone ever said you need to buy somebody a book, I'd hand over the School of Life. It's the best book. It makes you think differently about
Alain de Botton.
Alain de Botton.
Okay.
And I would, he's a brilliant interviewee as well.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
really, really solid. So he's one of my favorites. Rory Sutherland, who
know of him. Yeah,
the perfect example of someone who can pluck brilliant examples to illustrate important messages. He is the person to go on and do that.
Love it. And then finally, we ask all our guests, what's the best or the worst piece of advice they've ever received?
That would have to be 18 months ago. From our business had been plateauing for 3 years. We were working harder to just plateau than we were 3 years before. Mic drop was around, but no one was joining. We had 40 members, but couldn't get anyone to sign up at all. And I just fundamentally reached this realization where I've taken the business to where I can without actually getting some help. A realization I wish I'd had 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
And I brought in a coach called Tom Ross, who's phenomenal. And he asked me to write a list out of every product that I offer and how much I enjoyed it and how much the product cost. That was the most cathartic exercise I've ever done in my whole life. It was amazing. I hated most of the things I was offering. And he reads through what I shared in a coaching session and he goes, "You've become everything to everyone." And that was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. I now have, publicly, I have 3 products. Now it's on the podcast. I now have 2 products. I've massively skimmed down on what I offer. And the business has grown at a really good rate. So that has been one sentence that's changed a huge amount for me.
Oh, I love those moments. So good. Alex, how do people find you?
LinkedIn, obviously.
LinkedIn, Alex Merry. And what's the name of your newsletter?
Founder to Thought Leader is the newsletter.
Brilliant.
And the Mic Drop OS, which I'd imagine will be launched when this comes out, we're going to have a tool that helps people download all of their content from LinkedIn so they can own their IP. And if that's not a reason to put your best content out, I do not know what is.
Yeah. Well, hopefully lots of takeaways. I've certainly got lots of thoughts whirring through my head. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts with us today.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Behind the SME. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others find the show. If you want to get in touch, you can find our email in the description. Until then, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.